Welcome to Sherlock Mondays, everyone. I am Edward G. Pettit of the Rosenbach Museum and Library in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and we are going on a biblio-venture through the stories of Sherlock Holmes. This is episode 14, The Adventure of the Blue Carbuncle, and joining me as co-host for this episode is Monica Schmidt. Hi, Monica.
Hey, how you doing, Ed?
I am great. And we also have two special guests joining
Two of my
us.
favorite people.
They want to start their videos. That will be Scott Monty. Oh, there he is. And
Hello, happy people.
Burt Wolder. Hey, Scott.
Hello, unhappy people.
From I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere. Some of you may have recently listened to their podcast when they had me on the show talking about Sherlock Mondays, and I thought, wouldn't this be perfect? This kind of synergy of Sherlockian audiences to bring us all together, right? And have you guys on too. So I look forward to talking to you guys in a little bit. Hold on, I need a little sip of water first.
Oh, look at that product promotion,
Nice
Burt.
mug.
Ooh, look at that mug. The I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere mug.
What Patreon level is that?
That's the cheap one. That's what it is.
$5 or more a month. Yes.
But it's well worth it. Let me tell you.
Totally worth it.
Well, everyone, what we do here on Sherlock Mondays is we deduce, decipher, dissect Arthur Conan Doyle's stories about the world's first consulting detective, Sherlock Holmes, and his able assistant, Dr. John Watson, in a kind of conversational annotation. And sometimes we have special guests on to talk about Sherlockian topics, like tonight. If you are watching live right now, please like and subscribe to these videos, and also have fun in the live chat. That's one of the joys of joining this show live, is to do the live chat with everybody on our YouTube channel. If you're watching the recording, well, you can still have fun. Please like and subscribe, and also put comments in, and that's fine, and I will respond to those when I see them after the show. Sherlock Mondays is also an audio podcast, so I can horn in on the other Sherlockian podcasters. And thank you to all of our podcast listeners. I would also ask everyone to please consider making a donation to the Rosenbach. If you've already donated or joined as a member in the last few months, thank you so much. We make these shows, we get to do these shows for free because we have people who support the shows. And so if you have not already donated or become a member, I invite you to do so. Before we start talking tonight, I about Sherlock stuff, I usually like to start talking about what I'm drinking. I think all of us are drinking tonight.
Yes.
Every episode features a Sher-locktail designed by one of our co-hosts, Mary Alcaro. And tonight we have two. And this is the first one, and I'm just going to talk about this one now, and then I'll hit the second one later after I've downed this. This is the Blue Carbuncle, and my glass here, if I can hold it right, has this little blue, like, stone globe in the middle. So I figure that serves as my Blue Carbuncle there as well. It's gin and vermouth and blue curacao, and it's delicious. And I made a little sugar. Monica made a little sugar rim too with it.
Actually, my husband made the blue sugar rim because my ginger is superior. He'll probably be making a guest appearance, bringing me my next drink. So,
well, that is delicious. You can find these recipes in the YouTube description for the episode. And I also send the recipe out via email every week for those of you who are registered for the show. You can register at Sherlock Mondays at the Rosenbach at rosenbach.org. All right, the next drink is the Christmas goose, which is, it's kind of like what do you call it? The mule,
like a Moscow,
it's like a Moscow mule. So,
but better.
Yes. So we'll be drinking that tonight. Our plan for tonight is we're gonna talk to our guests about I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, and then Monica and I will talk about the Blue Carbuncle. So let's get started. So, some of these shows wind up being marathon sessions. We'll try not to do that for tonight, although I've just given up trying to cut any show short.
Do you realize who you've asked to your show tonight, Ed? I mean, come on.
I have no problem cutting other people off and getting rid of them. I can't stop talking though. We run for hours. All right. Scott Monty was invested in the Baker Street Irregulars as Corporal Henry Wood. He is the editor-in-chief, founder, and co-host of I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere. And he began his interest in Sherlock Holmes in his teenage years, during which he discovered his first Sherlockian society, the Men on the Tour in Connecticut, and that became his first social network. Burt Wolder was invested in the Baker Street Irregulars as the third pillar from the left, which I love, Burt. And it's from Side of Four, right? Is that where they meet, Mary?
Yes, sure. Yeah, it's at the Lyceum Theater.
That Bram Stoker was managing. Bram was probably there watching people come in.
Yeah.
Burt is the editor and co-host of I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, and first met Sherlock Holmes in his boyhood school library. And he wrote in his bio, when William S. Baring Gould's The Annotated Sherlock Holmes appeared, he discovered he was not alone in his love of Baker Street. Scott and Burt, I am so happy to have you on one of my shows now, which is nice. I was on I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere twice. And now I get to bring you guys here to grill you.
Thank you.
To be here.
How many years have you done the podcast?
We aired our first episode, recorded and aired our first episode in June of 2007. So we are about to wrap up our 17th season of I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, going into the 18th season in 2024. And just because we're masochists, as many Sherlockians are, we started a second podcast, much to Burt's chagrin. I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere is an interview show. It's like Fresh Air meets Car Talk for Sherlockians, if you will. We do that twice a month. And then on a weekly basis, every Wednesday, we release an episode of Trifles, which is a shorter show where we talk about the minutia in the Sherlock Holmes stories, whatever happens to touch our fancy from one week to another.
How long? And recently you said how long has Trifles been going now?
Trifles is about to wrap up its 7th season. By the end of this year, we will have recorded our 365th episode, which means if you're truly a masochist like we are, you will have a Trifles episode for every day of the year.
There you go. When you recently said that, I think on the last try, and I was like, in my head, it's kind of new. Like, oh, that's the new one that you guys do, but that's been around a while now as well. But that's how long I've been listening to them.
Yeah, well, it's new the way Jimmy Carter is new compared to William Howard Taft.
How did it get started in the beginning, Scott? Because you were running a blog first, weren't you?
Yeah, I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere.com actually began its life as the Baker Street blog back in 2005. At the time, I was the business manager for the Baker Street Journal, which, for those not yet initiated, that is the official publication of the Baker Street Irregulars. It's available to anyone who wishes to subscribe. You don't have to be a member in order to subscribe. But that's been in near constant publication since 1946. And when I took over as business manager, I thought, the world is starting to move a little faster than quarterly updates. So what if we could have some updates on Sherlockian news, just trivial goings on and all sorts of things that are happening that we see in the world of Sherlock Holmes on a regular real-time basis. So I began blogging as the Baker Street blog. Burt and I had a long conversation in early 2007, I think it was, Burt, where we are both lovers of old-time radio, and we appreciate the medium of audio. And we thought, well, Sherlockians, there's an old Sherlock Holmes radio program. Sherlockians that we know and love, they love radio too. What if we did some sort of talk show for Sherlockians? And we batted the idea around back and forth. And as he usually does, Burt improved every inkling of an idea that I had to really polish it up and give it the spit shine that it has today. And we embarked on this wonderful journey.
Or
Well,
it has
that's Scott's
at
side.
least half of that. The spit part, I think it has, but the shine part. Yeah, as a kid, I had a bizarre collection of hobbies: ventriloquism, magic, audio,
I
photography.
I had an Edgar Berg, I had a Charlie McCarthy puppet as a
So
child.
did Scott. So
Me too.
I learned the entire Who's on First routine with my Charlie McCarthy puppet.
oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
I was
Chris,
terrible. I was
trying
just
to
like
think of it.
talking. I think I was just talking out loud as
Yeah,
I did,
right.
but it didn't like I thought I was being good.
Well, my father's uncle was a performer, and he gave me his professional figure, and then I've got
Wow.
another one. So vent was a big thing for me. But audio, I loved recording. I was one of those kids, one of those kids, with with a razor blade and tape and splicing in the old days of reel to reel and then cassette. And I had friends who lived in another state, and I would make these little recordings on 3-inch reels and send them to them in the mail. So audio was a huge hit. And then when the technology made podcasting popular, wow. And then to be able to talk about Sherlock Holmes, with somebody else and with an audience just seemed to
Yeah.
us to be such a great idea.
That's the great part when you just stop talking to yourself about Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, and I've almost stopped talking to myself about
Yes.
Sherlock. I'm getting close.
So you were easy to rope into this, huh, Bert? So,
Well, and we love the technology and it was so simple. We
did
had all these years. We've only lost one episode. We were recording on a
That is true.
computer and the hard drive died. But other than that, we've survived the technology evolutions and everything else. And
yeah.
now
Don't ask us who that episode was.
no, we won't tell you. Privately, we'll tell you.
When you first began it, did you get the like what internet? What is was this because you came in early in the podcasting scene. Now there's a gazillion podcasts and everyone listens, but you
Well,
came in with not that much out there.
yeah, the earliest days, actually, if you go back to some of our early entries on the blog and in the podcast, we're teaching people what RSS was, which that doesn't even make sense now, but teaching people, how to listen to this and giving them all kinds of options. And that's something we've consistently done because with a wide audience and Sherlockians range in age from teenagers, even preteens in some cases, all the way up to centenarians. And you want to be able to give people an experience that they can enjoy on their own terms. And because of that, we have constantly published in various platforms to make it easy for people to find and consume our content. So in those earliest days, yeah, it was like pushing a rope in some cases. And I actually worked at an advertising agency at the time, a business to business advertising agency that specialized in high tech and digital and healthcare. And we had a client that was an early stage biotech company, and they wanted to do something other than the typical white papers that biotech companies were doing at the time to help people understand who they were and what they stood for. And this was about 3 months after podcasting came out. And I said, how about a podcast? You guys could host it, bring on smart people, and by virtue of the conversations that you direct, your intelligence, your thought leadership will appeal to your audience and they'll want to know more about you. Right. And they said, well, have you got any case studies on this? And I said, look, lady, this technology is about 3 months old. Do you want to read a case study or do you want to be a case study? And she said, I want to read a case study. So I left that agency.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
similar to what happened to us a couple of years ago when the pandemic hit, and I had to move everything onto Zoom, all the courses from the Rosenbach, and then start these shows. And it was teaching, and I there was a moment where I was like, I'm not your IT person. You're gonna have to figure out how to watch it on your own, especially because I was doing live shows. But we did have to teach people did have to teach people to use the medium. When what's the, I mean, besides the size, because you have a pretty big audience now, but what was it like in the beginning? Did you feel like you were in a room, you were talking to 10 people, or did it explode right away?
Well, I mean, we're up to what, double-digit listeners now, Burt? Is that right?
Oh, yeah,
No,
we're very happy with the size of the audience we have. We didn't have, at least I can speak for myself, I didn't have any sense of the audience. In fact, when Scott would tell me the numbers, I was always surprised. And we did see a step function, particularly in the days of Benedict Cumberbatch and the BBC series, stuff we happened to do together with our friends who were the Baker Street Babes. We managed to get a great audience. And then we got speakers like Stephen Moffat and Fritz Weaver, who came on to talk to us about Baker Street. We got some name people.
Yeah.
And the audience just sort of grew. But I always felt I was just talking to a friend, which, and since I never cared much for Scott, it was a wonderful performance.
Well, our numbers really blew up. I think the first time Ed was on the show, wasn't that right?
Oh, that's
Burt?
what it was.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
I have a large family.
The Pettit posse. The Pettit posse is huge.
But you started at that time where, like, Sherlock, the BBC was soon to come out, all this stuff was happening, and it's interesting that I kind of think that it's not coincidental that the explosion of the internet starting and then the Sherlockian world suddenly exploding as it did.
Yeah. And, Ed, I've seen that happen with a number of industries. I was actually approached at the end of 2007. And by the way, in 2007 on the Baker Street blog, this was pre-Robert Downey Jr. Recall that film first aired in 2009. And there was all sorts of, as there always are, rumors going around on the internet as to who was going to play Sherlock Holmes in this Warner Brothers produced movie. And in 2007, on April 1st, and that date is important, I wrote an article for the Baker Street blog saying that Russell Crowe had been rumored. However, he had been tossed over in favor of Nicholas Rowe, who, of course, played young Sherlock Holmes and later came back to play Sherlock Holmes in a movie scene in the Ian McKellen Mr. Holmes, right? So we not only fooled a lot of people with that, and it got picked up by a number of Hollywood blogs, but we are also a little prescient in terms of our prediction of Nicholas Rowe reprising his role. Sure. But so that was 2007. And at the same time, I was actually recruited by Ford Motor Company in late 2007 to join their communications team as the first executive in charge of social media. And I accepted the offer in mid-2008 with the expectation that by 2010, Ford's business plan would come roaring back. And this is the important part that connects us back to Sherlock Holmes. The public's understanding and interest and ability to connect on social media would begin to rise, and there would be this intersection where the two would absolutely take off. Yeah. And quite frankly, I was honored to take that role at Ford, knowing that I was another Baker Street irregular who was working in the automotive industry, much like Edgar W. Smith had years before.
Do you have all the secretaries like Edgar Smith had to type up everything for you? Do all this?
I didn't have that. No, I've just got Burt.
Monica, Ed, the one thing I would add to that is that here's the interesting thing, and it's the reason why Sherlock Holmes is eternal. Holmes, so here are the stories, here are the cases, what happens, what comes along? Cinema. Conan Doyle sells the cinema rights to the French, thinking, well, this is interesting, but why not? Send me a check. Cinema becomes a big thing. He has to pay more than he paid originally to get the rights back. 1929, 1930, radio comes along. What migrates? Popular culture migrates to these media. And so Holmes becomes big on radio. And then what happens? It's on television. And so this is just a further evolution. And we've
Mhm.
seen audio evolutions. Now we have audiobooks, we have audible plays like Moriarty and the second version of that. And we've benefited because we've been lucky enough to have the producers, the actors, the writers who've done all those programs as subjects to get on the show and talk about Sherlock Holmes.
There's a lot of intersectionality between everything that's going on in the world and this blog, or this podcast.
Right.
And the Conan Doyle estate has been battling everyone all along. We
Huh?
won't go down that road though.
No.
Monica, how early did you listen to these guys?
Oh
Were you
God.
very
I
early?
mean, the funny
You're so
thing
much
is that
younger.
like I was just gonna say I'm
Were you,
gonna
were you in
do a
high
mea
school?
culpa
Were
here.
you in grade
Oh,
school? What were you in?
Bless
Middle
you
school?
for
It
saying
was in
that. No, I was in
kindergarten.
grad school, but no, I actually had finished my master's degree. I didn't. I mean, I caught a couple of the early episodes, but I was never really a huge podcast person, and so I started catching up like in the neighborhood of about like episode 120-ish. So what I've done this past year is actually I started at episode 1 and worked my way up to where I started years ago, and now
Ooh, a
I
I'm
reload.
know
sorry.
you can buy me a drink in New York.
Monica, here's the bad news. You're never going to get those hours back.
I know, but I'm okay with that. The worst part is though, is my husband's never going to get some of those hours. He's
Yeah.
less okay with that than I am. So
I can remember the early show. You used to also have a phone line that people could call in
that was
and
so
leave
precious.
messages for the show. And I mean, that leads me into the whole, like, how has this audience changed over time?
That's a good question, Ed. So we still do have the phone line, although we have upgraded the number. I think the number is now 5 1895 221 5.
It doesn't start with 555, right? You're not like
No, but it is 1895, which is a very Sherlockian number, and 221, another very Sherlockian number, bracketed by fives.
And
So
do people still use it?
well, that's the thing, Ed. Our audience has shifted such that we are more likely to actually get an MP3 file attached to an email as a comment, which essentially is a voicemail. But, now everyone is carrying around, I don't even know. Oh, yeah. Everyone's carrying around the Black Mirror, right? That they can just speak into it. They could record their own podcast if they wanted to. This is a big secret we don't like to tell everyone about. They could outflank us very easily. But anyone can record something into their phone and then attach that file to an email and send it in. And we get more of those than we do of the phone calls now. And we keep the phone lines open just for the sake of history and I suppose
the annual pledge drive. Don't forget the annual
yes.
pledge drive.
There you go.
Somebody on our live chat was lamenting and that Monica had not been introduced. And like perhaps it was a new viewer and that Monica is a recurring co-host. So we did those introductions on your first show, which would have been the first part of Sign of 4, episode.
Yeah, so episode 3. Exactly. It's all good. You'll get to hear me talk plenty later. So you'll get sick of the sound of my voice. So I'm just taking it back to the gentleman.
Do you guys see any changes in the way people approach Sherlock and the way they enjoy Sherlock over the years? Has that changed with this whole explosion of a different kind of fan? A lot of fans who have come in first via TV or movies rather than from reading, which is how, we all first came to it.
Well, I'll just answer that in two quick ways and then return it over to Scott. The interesting thing that I've observed is that we've seen more variation in two things. One is we've seen more variation in how people get into Sherlock Holmes. So normally people would say, oh yeah, in high school or wherever it was, middle school, I read a particular story, but there's been much more variety. I saw a comic book, I saw a movie, I saw a particular television show, but it was an odd television show. So the variety in the cultural explosion has brought in clearly more people. But the other thing is that much like popular culture, that the extension of Sherlock Holmes into people's lives has become much more personal. And so you've seen the John Locke stuff around Benedict Cumberbatch and Martin Freeman, their characters. people who imprint upon them, their own desires for closeness and satisfaction and adventure and story. And that reflects, I think, the variety in the culture today. So I've seen that. Just turn it over to Scott.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo that, Burt. I mean, look, the wonderful thing about Sherlock Holmes as a hobby or as an avocation for some of us is that you can put any part of yourself into it. And it's always been that way. You look through old issues of the Baker Street Journal, and somebody says, well, I want to write about Sherlock Holmes and tennis because I'm interested in tennis. I want to write about Sherlock Holmes and the Victorian train schedule out of the Baedeker's Guide because I like trains, right? There's always been an element of that. And just as Burt has said, we find so many people making it so personal and being fearless about putting it out there, which I love. There's a saying that a lot of us share in this hobby, and that is all Sherlock is good Sherlock. And that means whatever springs to mind, whatever turns you on, whatever brings you to these wonderful characters that Conan Doyle created some 150 years ago, it's okay. Not everybody may share that same worldview, but good for you for sharing it with the world. And we need more of that.
Yep.
Yeah, well said. Yeah.
Well said.
Very well said, except Will Ferrell, Holmes and Watson. I think we can make an exception for that one. That is not good Holmes.
Hey,
except for maybe Victorian selfie scene. So
if that's your cup of tea, somebody who that's your
no,
favorite
it's
Sherlock
okay.
movie,
Hey.
you're wrong, but okay. But enjoy it.
You can have
Enjoy
bad
it.
taste. It's okay.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, the interesting thing is the evolution of taste and evaluation. When I first saw years ago the film when it came out Without a Clue, I didn't much care for it. But a couple of years later in Bloomington, I was with a group of Sherlockians. We all screened Without a Clue.
Gillette
And I thought it was the most wonderful, funny movie I'd ever seen. So who knows? In 10 years, you could be rolling in the aisles at Will Ferrell's Sherlock Holmes.
Not sure about that one, but
Maybe it will improve
see.
over
Only time will
time.
tell. Yeah,
Okay.
only time will tell.
Well, Burt, I have to think that particular experience, because it was screened in a theater and you were surrounded by a bunch of other Sherlockians, it's like the Mystery Science Theater 3000 experience. You're watching something that's maybe questionable in its quality, but you're having a rollicking good time because you're there with other like-minded people.
Yeah, it was a good experience. I was at that screening. That was, oh my gosh. Let's see, that had to have been, 28
years ago,
17, 18.
5 or 6 years ago, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a lovely experience. So I think it was also the 75th anniversary of The Hound of the Baskervilles. Yeah, I think the 1939 version. I think.
Oh, the 39 Hound.
The 39 version. Yeah.
Oh, maybe you're
I'm
right.
trying to remember my Gillette to Brett's. I've been to 2, so
Gillette
I know
to
that
Brett.
we're overdue for a Gillette to Brett.
Yeah, Gillette
We
to Brett,
are.
for people that don't know, is a conference that happens. Where does it happen?
Well, it's
again?
in Bloomington, Indiana, but it happens irregularly. It's run by Steve Doyle, of Wessex Press. So it's wonderful. It's a Sherlockian film and television conference, and I attended the 4th one in 2014, and then the 5th one, whatever year that was. I think that was 2019.
2019.
Actually, I think it was
2018.
2018 because it was before I got invested, and I got invested in January of 2019. So,
Right.
I put a link into our episode where we were at Gillette to Brett 5.
Mhm.
I remember when we interviewed Steve Doyle in one of our early episodes, Burt, we suggested calling the second iteration of Gillette to Brett 2 Electric Boogaloo. Never took off though. I can't understand that.
I would have gone to that one. As you could tell, I'm clearly an Electric Boogaloo kind of guy. The story, before we wrap up and I say goodnight tonight, good night to you gentlemen, and Monica and I talk about this story, we're going to talk about the Blue Carbuncle. And I thought I would throw it out to you guys to get your impressions. Spoilers don't matter. The people watching have read it and we're talking about the story. And I know you've covered it several times on your show. And I know that because one of the things I do to prep for shows is I search on your Sherlock to see what you guys have said about things, what if you've had guests on talking about certain things. And you have several, 4 or more
Right.
shows that you've dealt with Blue Carbuncle.
Right. Well, I would just start and turn it over to Scott. One of the things that's memorable to me is that years ago when we talked about the Blue Carbuncle, in the middle of the show, or whenever it was in the show, Scott suggested that I read Morley's essay, which I did as a cold read, but it
I
was a
love that.
wonderful experience to read it because in it you get a sense of his thinking and you get a sense of his writing process because there's
Yeah.
some point in the essay where he clearly stops and then the next day he picked up the back half of it. But in there you get it's a great lens with which to get a sense of the whole Sherlockian world as it was in Morley's day because he goes through the pageant drawings, he goes through
Yeah.
the things that a modern audience would need to know about, the basket chair. And then he has these amazing personal revelations. You can imagine him typing his essay. And this is an essay he wrote for the Baker Street Irregulars that was then published individually and is available probably in several places online about the carbuncle. But you get his reminiscences. He remembers that the Ulster coat, which Sidney Paget pictured Holmes wearing, was one similar to his father's that became his dressing gown when he was a kid.
Yeah.
Get in and out of the shower, and that was passed on to his brothers, and you get all this wonderful stuff. And he ends it, he ends this whole essay with a lovely note that, and I think much of Morley's commentary about the essay may be more meaningful than the actual case itself. I hesitate to say, but he says, those who have loved these many years, this most kindly and unintentional of Christmas stories, send it off in this modest reprint to the right kind of people. It belongs in what that good man, Oscar Firkins of the University of Minnesota, once called the warm little hollow between Christmas and the New Year. And that should be, if beings were as sensitive as one would like to suppose, a moment of peace. And there, you just sort of get the thumbprint of the man and the sentimentality of the man and the translation of the story into terms that were relevant to him.
I was following along. I have my edition here, and I loved when you read that that intro on that show that time. So I remember it from when it first aired, and I re-listened to it recently.
Oh, thank you.
Well, I think Ed, you've touched on it perfectly because it's one of my favorites as well. The Burt Wolder reading of the Christopher Morley introduction to this edition. Now, you and I, Ed, we have the same edition. This is a hardcover with a slip cover here.
You've got the dust jacket. I'm not that. I don't have like that collectible. I wound up getting a copy without the dust jacket.
Well,
but it was cheap.
And the good news, yeah, these are available fairly inexpensively on AB Books. It was published in 1948 by the Baker Street Irregulars, and this is back when the Irregulars first started their move into publishing, and it's still continued to this day. This was, and by the way, I like my edition too because it's signed by Edgar Smith.
Yeah.
Right.
No
Edgar
way.
was the head of the BSI from 1940 to 1960 and was the business mind behind getting this published. But Morley's words to me, and I'm going to leave it in a place where it's going to be a perfect segue for you, Ed. So sit back and enjoy. It's some of the things that Morley talks about, making a model stage set for a toy theater to represent this story on Baker Street. Cellophane windows crystallized with frost, the coal fire, the scuttle, the fiddle, Holmes's slippers. Describing this wonderful three-dimensional thing just as a hobby that he did at one point or another. His description of food, where he said, much has been said about Holmes's housekeeping, but no one has remarked on his passion for meat. And bird game, we have records of his meals of grouse, pheasant, partridge, woodcock, and pâté de foie gras, cold beef and eggs and oysters, but he never ate fish. He can't have been English. There must have been some talk about trout in the Shoscombe case, but only as pretext. And here, continuing on the food theme, I really enjoy listening to Burt recite this part because the onomatopoetic nature of it, where he I don't know if Morley wrote this for the ear, but it certainly is read fairly well for the ear, where he talks about Henry Baker joining the Goose Club at the Alpha at the corner of Museum and Great Russell Streets. It used to have, in the old days, about 1924, the most beautiful cross-cut and rose and white jambon of ham waiting for slice behind the bar, and crisp, crusty sea cants of fresh bread. I just think that, the way Morley described that just so melodically was wonderful. And where I'll leave it for you, Ed, is with another interest hanging there behind you. Of course, Morley calls this a Christmas story without slush, meaning without sentiment. And he says, it makes me sad to think that the one perfect reader for it, the man more than any other would have delighted in its economy and skill, never saw it. I mean, of course, Charles Dickens. How much Dickens might have learned from it if he had been capable of learning. I'm quite serious when I say that. As a story, The Blue Carbuncle is a far better work of art than the immortal Christmas Carol. The latter, canonized by over 100 years of sentiment, is more legendary than legible. It contains deathless scenes of sheer genius, but all clanked and labored together by a heavy drag of mechanical framework. And as a collector, I would rather have Sidney Paget's original drawings for this story in the old Strand Magazine for January 1892 than Leech's color plates for the Carol.
Perfect.
Well, thank you. That is a perfect way to, well, we don't have to talk about it tonight, Monica. We'll just say good night, everyone. That was the Blue Carbuncle. Thank you. We have lots of details to hit in it, but I do love this Morley essay on it. I actually have a little piece that I'm probably going to read a little later during the show as it highlights something in the text.
Good.
But Scott and Burt, thank you so much for taking the time. People can find I Hear of Sherlock everywhere online. IHOSE, as all you kids in the know call it. And I look forward to many more episodes of your show, and Trifles especially. I really love Trifles, so I do not miss a week without listening to Trifles. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank
I'll
you.
see you in a couple of weeks, boys.
Of course, compliments of the season, both of you.
Yep.
To
And
you as well.
too.
All righty. Bye-bye. All right, Monica, we need to get on with this story.
Get on with it.
Just the two of us. And we are, let's see. We have shared a PDF of the facsimile for the adventure of the Blue Carbuncle as it was originally published in the January 1892 issue of the Strand Magazine. You can download that on the Rosenbach's Sherlock Mondays page. This story was published in January 1892, and then when we were covering the stories on the show, we skipped over it. We, decided to do Blue Carbuncle in the time when we were going to be live at Christmas. So
Speaking of which, here, wait. Now
there
we're
you go.
themed.
Now you're all set.
So yes, now we're appropriately themed.
If people want to see me wear my father Christmas robe and top hat, then you have to watch Pickwick Monthly number 10, which you can find on the Rosenbach's YouTube page. And we talked about the Christmas issue of Pickwick Monthly from Dickens. The Blue Carbuncle followed Man with a Twisted Lip and Speckled Band. And then Blue
was followed by.
So I'm just trying to situate people in the way readers were first encountering it. They did Man with the Twisted Lip, Speckled Band, or no,
It would be Man with the Twisted Lip, Blue Carbuncle, Speckled Band.
Thank you. Man with
Yeah.
the Twisted Lip, and then Blue Carbuncle, and then the Speckled Band. So the audience was coming off Sherlock's trip to the opium den, but
Oh, yeah.
they had not yet encountered the deadly
The
snake,
snakes.
or
So
the severed thumb, nor the spurned bachelor lord. So
exactly.
this is where the audience is hitting it.
Yeah, this is a story a little bit out of place in we'll just say out of place within the publication order, but appropriately in place because of when we're airing this episode.
And it was uh it was not published in the Strand in New York City in America until February.
Mhm.
And so it was preceded in America by other newspapers, including the Philadelphia Inquirer, in which it was entitled "The Christmas Goose That Swallowed the Diamond."
Ooh. But it
And
wasn't a diamond.
and yeah, and it included 2 illustrations by F.C. Swayze. Same spelling as Patrick. I wonder if it was a distant ancestor. But in it, let me share this.
Yeah,
Let
please
me
do.
share uh that edition with it in there. And it
Yeah.
was, here it is. Oh, maybe not. Let me find it. Sorry.
Yep.
And now I hit share, and where is it? Somewhere here. Oh my gosh. I have too many
I was about
windows.
to say too many tabs open.
Why do I have, why is it not doing this? It never, it always works so well for me. Let
It's the
me
Christmas episode. Of course, it's all going to go awry.
open up a picture and just show you the illustration. Then is what I will do.
Okay.
The illustration in the Philadelphia Inquirer by F.C. Swayze looks like this. There are 2 illustrations, and this is the second one. And it is when they've got Ryder in the room and he's confronting him. And here's Sherlock
begging.
with this very Doylean mustache, is what
Yeah, that is very fabulously Doylean.
So, and this isn't the only, Sherlock with a mustache. Several illustrators gave him a mustache early on that Paget didn't do, obviously. And but here's the way these Philadelphia readers were encountering their Sherlock Holmes in an illustration.
It's interesting that Watson is balding.
He is. He's bald. He's not
Yeah.
balding. He's pretty much bald.
Yeah, well, he's got a little on the back.
A little bit coming up there, but yeah, he's bald. But here's Sherlock with the mustache.
Yeah.
And it's just fascinating to see these early illustrations of him with a mustache that don't
absolutely.
usually happen in because Paget doesn't do him that. The Philadelphia Inquirer had also done Twisted Lip in December. They did Blue Carbuncle in January, Speckled Band in February, The Noble Bachelor in March, and they would publish. Hi, Belle.
Best husband ever.
Yes, there you go. Bringing you drinks. Oh my gosh.
I know. I couldn't have asked for a better husband. Most supportive, and he brought me the Christmas goose.
And the Philadelphia Inquirer at the time would continue to publish these stories, throughout the year, and then a bunch of other non-Sherlock stories from Doyle and serialized novels. So they really jumped on the whole, Conan Doyle. I mean, he's getting big, and the American market, which he also sold the rights to separately from the Strand, so he could serialize the stories and do other things. He had a great agent at the time that he had, and he was really growing his readership. So, on to the story.
Ah, yes.
It is adventure number 7. I had called upon my friend Sherlock Holmes upon the 2nd morning after Christmas with the intention of wishing him the compliments of the season. And thus it begins. And we get a story that kind of becomes like it's also a Christmas story. Well,
Oh, it
because of the
so
ending,
is.
because of
It's
the ending, right?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, it's a Christmas story because of the ending, but also, I mean, just kind of focusing on the compliments of the season. I know that there's this in America, there's this big war of Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. This is my favorite holiday neutral winter
There you go.
season's greeting. As a therapist who works with clients from all sorts of backgrounds, wishing them the compliments of the season has become my default winter greeting. And I love it. It's very on brand, but it's also fabulous. But yeah, this whole concept of Christmas as the season for forgiveness very much comes into play with the end
Yeah.
of the story. And I wrote an essay about that in Chris Redman's anthology About 60, which is a story or an anthology of why every Sherlock Holmes story is the best. And so he assembled 60 different authors, each taking a story of the canon. And I had the Blue Carbuncle, and I used this whole concept of justice tempered with mercy
Yeah.
that appears at the end, as the reason why I think the Blue
Good.
Carbuncle is the best.
We'll talk about that at the end.
Yes.
This is from my Christopher Morley
Mhm.
version of the adventure, and what he says about Chris. He says he, Watson, called on Holmes to wish him in his restrained way the compliments of the season. That is the first frosty phrase to remember. Not a merry old Christmas, not jocund Yule, just the bashful British meiosis compliments of the season. Wary old Watson, one of Britain's great understatesmen. No emotional Heilig yacht knocked, no Tannenbaum, no vast substantial fezziwigs, no lachrymose Yuletide yowling. Compliments of the season, old boy. And how are you, Holmes? So the he finds Holmes in,
Mhm.
lounging upon the sofa in the
Purple dressing gown.
purple
Um,
dressing gown. This is the second
yes.
dressing gown, right?
So yes, we had blue and twists, and then we have purple here, and there's somewhere in there, there's mouse.
And Mouse will eventually
They
come, right?
show up.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
mouse will eventually show up.
He's got a pipe rack within his reach upon the right, a pile of crumpled morning papers. We talk in a later story from this, then Noble Bachelor. Watson's got the giant pile of newspapers. Here's
Mhm.
Holmes with the pile of newspapers next to him, and he's observing a hat with his lens and his forceps on the seat on the chair.
Mhm.
He's a very we're getting set up for one of those, Dr. Bell
Yes.
tricks that Sherlock likes to do, right?
Sherlock does the trick.
Um, I love that it's the lounging upon the sofa and the hat that he's looking at,
Mhm.
seedy and disreputable.
Yeah.
This is, Holmes and the way he's sitting, let me I have to share the picture,
Mhm.
the illustration
From
uh
Pettit.
from Paget, the here's the Strand Magazine issue, and here's the first image of him, and
Yes.
with the dressing gown and the this way he's
And the
sitting, so
on the
casually,
fainting
his
couch. Yeah.
legs pulled up and his arm holding his ankle. This is I don't know, it's very louche. It's very it's bohemian, the
Mhm.
way that Doyle had kind of begun his Sherlock Holmes.
Mhm.
Later he will become far more kind of, stalwart, almost
Stiff
John
upper
Bull
lip.
kind of,
Yeah. Yeah.
Victorian in the Edwardian age. Maybe he's just Edwardian then later in the Sherlock Holmes stories. But
Mhm.
here he's still that. Uh, it's almost like the you know kind of respectable people don't sit like that in
Yeah.
the middle class Victorian age, or they're not supposed to sit like that. That's not the
Yeah.
image you get of a respectable Victorian middle class gentleman.
Yeah, it's an illustration, kind of like out of place. It's not what you would expect of Holmes in the way that we would conceptualize an upper, or we'll just say middle class British gentleman.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah, the Jeremy Brett version does a really great
yeah.
job of showing this in the episode of that, or the Blue Carbuncle as well.
And this is Holmes. This is, this is the way that, he wants that Doyle wants to portray him in the beginning here.
Mhm.
And Paget, draws him wonderfully. He's been studying the hat, and he says to Watson, "I'm glad to have a friend with whom I can discuss my results,"
Mhm.
which is also a setup. And I think I think the reader should know by this point that he's going to embarrass Watson right now,
Yep.
which he does. And maybe it's his way of teaching him, but it's also his way of having fun, and it's
Uh,
also his way of showing off what he knows and how he can do that stuff.
all of the above, all of the above. And what's interesting is that like the observations that he makes in the hat, and I know several episodes ago I alluded to this essay that I wrote that won me the Speckled Band Sherlock Holmes Memorial Bull, but dealing with Henry, how Holmes picked up on subtle clues within his analysis of the hat to Henry Baker's alcoholism, and just kind of looking at it through a modern clinical lens of kind of what alcoholics look like, and kind of the we'll just say kind of wintertime familial expectations that are kind of put upon upon them, and the pressures that are put upon them. And so it was actually really fascinating looking at it from a clinical, or through a clinical lens, because it's like Holmes has this very modern 2023 kind of perspective of a systemic impact of what addiction does within the context of a relationship, and he's deducing it from the hat.
Yeah.
I mean, that's mind blowing to me. And this was written in what 1890 what? Yeah, I
92.
mean,
Yeah.
exactly, blown.
Well, written in 91.
Blown.
Yeah.
Yeah, in 1891, and it's mind blowing that 130 odd years later, this is, we'll just say the clues are there, the context is there, and so he's again a man out of time here, which is again one of the things that I genuinely love about Holmes, is that he doesn't belong here, and yet he's here, and that's what makes him kind of the superhero.
He says to Watson, "Oh, this
Yes.
is my second drink.
Yes.
This is the Christmas goose. It is I need to get to it is the recipe is Grey Goose vodka, Grey Goose, because we'll get a goose soon.
Yeah.
Cranberry juice, little lime juice, and ginger beer. And
Yes.
and the rosemary though makes it nice. We get fresh rosemary.
Yep,
Thank
fresh rosemary, and
my
yes,
super wife today
cranberries.
for getting me fresh rosemary. Yeah, and I just put a bunch of cranberries in there. The pro
Yes.
tip for Mary Alcaro was to
Mhm.
freeze your cranberries first, which I did. So worked out very well.
Excellent, excellent.
Yeah, it's a take on a Moscow Mule. Is it just the cranberry juice is different from a Moscow Mule? Is that how we're changing this?
I think the
quite remember.
cranberry, yeah, I think the cranberry is primarily the change on the
Oh,
traditional
man.
Yule recipe, but yeah,
This is tasty. So
it's quite lovely. But yes,
Holmes and Watson, before we get to the goose that they find,
Yes.
Holmes says this. Watson first thinks this hat is connected with some sordid crime, and then Holmes says no, it's not. But I love this, times capsule of and where he is and how he's seeing crime where he is. Only one of those whimsical little incidents which will happen when you have 4 million human beings all jostling each other within the space of a few square miles, amid the action and reaction of so dense a swarm of humanity. Every possible combination of events may be expected to take place, and many a little problem will be presented, which may be striking and bizarre without being criminal.
Yes.
Great setup for this story. Great setup for this kind of world that they live in and the kinds of stories that Doyle wants to tell. These odd things that happen
Mhm.
in the midst of an urban environment.
Mhm.
Now, some stories take Holmes outside of London, but that's not the hook for these stories.
Yeah.
His readership then, or I think for now.
No, I would agree with that. Is just that, but I mean, when you think about it, if we examine the canon as a whole, actually, not all of them are criminal acts. There's
As he
not all the
says, yeah.
murders, there's not all the criminals, there's not all anything. And even though this is criminal, in its nature, it really is about, I mean, we can basically say it's kind of like in some ways Les Miserables,
Yeah.
Jean Valjean. I'm trying to. I mean, it's not quite stealing a loaf of bread, but
What will
it's
happen
about people
later?
trying to get ahead.
Well,
Yeah.
what will happen later is criminal, but at this
Yes.
point, it's not
Yeah.
criminal yet, and then
Yes.
it will
Yeah.
become that.
Yes.
Watson mentions other cases, and then Holmes does too, and
Yeah.
Doyle is constantly plugging stuff that he's
Well, yeah,
already written.
it's somebody in the on the Facebook group chat. I wish I could
Yeah,
remember whom.
it was
Observe.
Adam.
This is thank bless you, Adam. Excellent observation. But yeah, I think this might be the first time that
It's not.
it's
It's
not.
happened already. Yeah.
Oh, but I still love it nonetheless in terms of the plugging of the existing stories.
Doyle loves to plug the early stories, and especially
Yep.
early on in the Strand, he was plugging Study in Scarlet and Sign of Four because
Yep.
they're not in the Strand, and now he keeps hitting these stories. And what it does is it
Mhm.
creates this history. It, along with the unpublished cases,
Mhm.
it creates the history of these characters together at a very early stage. It's only been a few months that this has been
Yeah.
going on, but
But
there's
it's
all this stuff
genius.
happening, and so it's a plug, and it's a
Yeah.
go
It's
read
a, it's
back
a, it's a
issues.
plug, but it's
Strand.
also genius marketing within the context of the story. And
Yeah.
I mean that's brilliant.
Well, he tells Watson how this hat has come to him, and it was given to him by Peterson, the commissionaire.
Ah, the commissionaire.
If people don't know what a commissionaire is, he is he's like a uniformed door attendant or a messenger for people.
Usually formerly military.
Almost
Yeah.
always. And Maverick, because there was a corps of commissionaires for pensioned soldiers that was set up in the 19th century by some former army officer or
Mhm.
something like that. And
Mhm.
so the commissionaires turn up more than once in stories. And they have a little uniform on that,
Mhm.
makes them kind of official, like a security guard
Oh,
kind of uniform.
well,
Right?
it's kind of that classic doorman uniform when you like look at like old classic movies or movie theater. Well, actually, I shouldn't say movie theater. Actual theater attendants. Somebody who is the
Yeah.
like usher, if you will. So, yeah, yeah.
So Holmes tells the story how he got this hat. It was he calls it a battered billy cock. So
Hmm.
which has its, very, salacious hints at it going there, but it's not that. It's not what he's talking about, his
No.
battered billy cock. But it's an intellectual problem. So get your mind out of the gutter, Watson. An intellectual problem. Um, it arrived on Christmas morning with a fat goose. That Peterson, the commissionaire, had brought it to him, and the whole story where it was 4 a.m. and he saw Henry Baker with it, and the gang of youths or
Yeah, the
men.
gang of roughs, yes, was going to be attacking, or was trying to attack Baker, or at least or rob Baker or whatever,
Yeah,
and basically Baker being slightly inebriated,
slightly, yeah.
yeah,
No,
essentially is like, oh
he was
crap,
drunk.
a
Yeah.
uniformed officer,
Broke a
I'm going to
window.
drop my
Yeah.
stuff and run.
This is what happens when I was a kid, like run,
It's
like
the
you just
cops.
run. Yeah, you
It's the
just
cops.
run when something
Exactly.
happens. So, and it was a goose that he had dropped as well as his hat, and most unimpeachable Christmas goose. I'll take a
Oh
sip for
yes.
that one there.
Oh yes.
There. And there was a card on it that it's for Mrs. Henry Baker.
Oh, yes.
And then, of course, and Holmes says there's too many Henry Bakers. It's too common a name.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I don't know. It was in the Leslie Klinger annotated or the Gould, the William Barry Gould, that there weren't that many. You can actually look up in the directories at the time, and there aren't that many Henry Bakers actually. What does Holmes say? It's like hundreds or thousands of Bakers. And some hundreds of Henry Bakers. There actually weren't. It was like in the double digits, low double digits. So he could have probably found out who it was, but it's a common name. And Peterson ate the goose because he didn't want the goose to go bad. And, and now Holmes puts Watson through the steps. Like, what can you observe? What clue could you have to his identity? Watson asks, and Holmes is like, well, you can
what is it? I see nothing. On the contrary, you can see, Watson, you can see everything. You fail, however, to reason from what you see. You are too timid in drawing your inferences. As in, Holmes is like, okay, I'm going to show off now. So
he does.
Yes.
He also has that famous line, my method. You know my
methods.
And they go through it, and Watson doesn't, come up with too much. And then Holmes comes up with, he comes up with the whole list here. And it is
a lot.
Yeah, like the guy had a big head, so he has a big brain, which is the whole chronology thing, right? Because it's a large hat, so this guy must have at least had a bit very smart.
Well, it's phrenology, but it's also this is where my criminology background is kind of failing me. It was like Cesare Lombroso, I think, had the whole criminal physical thing. So large head equals large brain, which
the whole physiology thing that goes on, and there are certain features that you can denote someone's character because of them. But big heads were big brains, and that went back a while.
We're gonna go with that. We know that's not true anymore, but
don't tell the big-headed people that. Big-headed people are like, "What do you mean? I have a great brain. I have a giant head."
You might have a giant noggin, but
there you go. There's a hat secure on it.
Yes.
Which, for those who don't know, it's a little it's a kind of
almost like a little cord almost.
Yeah, that you could attach the hat that would secure it to your hair actually. So it didn't blow off.
There's actually a hat secure. My BSI classmate, Mike McSwiggan, bless Mike, he actually did a presentation on what this hat secure is. And it actually attaches to the buttonhole that is in a lot of the men's jackets. And
didn't know that. That's great.
Yeah, so I again learning random things.
And it's for the wind, right? It's because your hat could be blown off easily.
Yeah, I mean it's so you don't lose your hat. I mean it's like the closest thing that we have to like a hat secure, but it will keep your head on or your hat on your noggin.
Thank you for that.
Yeah,
because I was looking up things online and I'm finding old patents for them, and I'm like, oh, I do think there were some that literally attached to hair.
Attached to your hair, yeah.
They may have been for women actually.
Like a fascinator, essentially, But I mean, so basically, again, he acknowledges that the man's fairly intellectual, basically was fairly well to do because you couldn't afford this hat secure if you weren't. Plus, the hat was of high quality, but recognizes that he had fallen on evil days.
Yeah.
And
so it's highly intellectual, but fairly well to do within the last 3 years. Now fallen upon evil days. He had foresight, but he also got this moral retrogression, which is probably drink,
alcoholism.
And his wife has ceased to love him.
Ooh.
He's out of training, middle age, grizzled hair, like use lime cream. I mean, those things we can kind of believe, but because they're physical things on the hat. But but the rest of it, Christopher Morley has a great line in his thing about Holmes going through all his deductions. Morley writes, "This is what fiction exists for: to make delightful the impossible and unbelieved." Because especially the first time reading through this. I mean, of course, you could pick it apart after you've read it a ton of times and say, like, wait, you're really making a leap there. But you know what? It seems magical and it seems impossible. And then
Well,
Holmes tells you, and it's like, oh, yeah, okay, I get it.
well, okay, so like the idea that his wife has ceased to love him. I mean, yes, there's this leap, if you will. But if you understand kind of like the socio kind of like cultural issues that come with alcoholism, and especially during the holidays, it's not as big of a leap as one would think. There's a lot of as a therapist, I can say I have a lot of clients that come to me during this time of year with massive amounts of existential dread about not living up to familial expectations and dealing with familial judgment. Oh, my mom's going to judge me because of this. My sister's going to judge me because of that. My brother, thinks I'm a giant POS, because of X, Y, and Z. And so there's nothing quite like the winter holidays, especially Christmas, where there is this premium on family togetherness that really kind of drives that point home. But also, that whole concept of wanting to present oneself as the best, or at one's best point, during the holidays.
Yeah.
He bought a gift for his wife, often as a peace offering, probably because of the drinking, and not only that, but I'm sure this is the time of year that his wife basically expects him to step his stuff up and, like actually be a semi-responsible, person, buy her gifts, think of her. And that's a lot of pressure for somebody who's struggling. So, yeah.
And you mentioned the alcoholism that Holmes
Yeah.
gets, and then it turns out that is the case. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, we have the story from Peterson too, so we kind of know that it's there.
Well,
But
at least he was drunk at that point, so
yeah.
maybe not necessarily the full blown, but yeah.
There was a comment in the chat from Ray that you always have to keep ACD's alcoholic father in mind when reading the story. Did you touch on that in that?
In that
Doyle's
essay,
father?
I was playing the game, so with that essay, but if we take a step back from playing the game for a moment and look at ACD's dad, yeah, absolutely. When you have alcoholism that runs in your family and you have a first degree relative, you understand what it's like to have a holiday year in and year out of disappointment because substances are chosen over family togetherness.
For people that don't know, Doyle's father was institutionalized with
for
alcoholism and for many years.
other mental health reasons. Yeah. And so there's again this constant stream of disappointment that is amplified during the holidays because this is the time that we are supposed to be spending with families. And so it's a leap, but it's working within the context of the field, it's not too big of a leap. And it's actually what I see on a fairly regular basis in my practice. That's one of the reasons why my essay is entitled, we'll just say, not the most wonderful time of year. Yeah.
Well, he finishes with Doyle with Watson Watson can't believe that his wife doesn't love him, and he can see that. And it's like, well, it's too dirty. There's no way your wife's going to let you leave the house with a hat.
Oh yeah. I mean, okay. So again, Victorian times.
Although my wife would not let me leave the house with one of my hats if it was all dirty. Like she would be like,
yeah, I make sure that Bill's shoes are polished. And
there you go.
And
it's not just the wife. It's a good spouse will. It's not just because you're a wife. It is a good spouse to be like, that looks gross and you shouldn't be wearing that outside the house, right? So
yes, I do this. I do this frequently. So
well, Peterson, the commissionaire, rushes in, and the goose, sir, found in its crop, and he displayed, there it is, on the center of the palm, a brilliantly scintillating blue stone. Although this one's rather smaller than a bean in size.
This is the Granada
big bean
reproduction. Yeah, that's a big bean, but no.
But of such purity and radiance that it twinkled like an electric point in the dark hollow of his hand. I do, though, call out Doyle on this because the rather smaller than a bean, that's not like spectacular. if it's really small.
This is
That's
spectacular.
what it should look like.
Yes, well, this is a replica of the prop that was used in the Jeremy Brett version of the Speckled Band, or sorry, the Blue Carbuncle.
Yes.
Been a day. But yeah, this is a replica. I bought the replica along with a bunch of other things. I've still got to do the Sherlockian relics, volume 2, which is very expensive, but maybe that's a good hint for Bill for Christmas. But yeah, that Blue Carbuncle is quite fun, and hangs out on my bookshelves.
Two things here. Before we get
Yes.
to the carbuncle itself, Peterson says it was found in the goose's crop.
Ooh, okay.
Now,
So a fact check here. Geese don't have crops.
but they do have a space they can store food, or the way that they kind
Yes.
of do. So it's like it's not I got this from the Les Klinger annotated, who's got a little
Yeah.
essay after the story. And so
Yeah.
it turns out that they don't have a kind of crop that turkeys have,
Hmm.
but they do have a space where they store food, which is the point of a crop, right?
Yes. So it's mislabeled, but again, it gives
Well, you've
it
heard the
gives
Peter
Sherlockian.
Blau. You've heard the Peter Blau express.
Well, that it's a typo with an A instead of or with an O
Yeah.
instead of an
There was a
A.
typo in crop, if people can get that. So,
Yes.
it
Yes.
ruins the joke if you say what it is.
Oh,
But it is a typo in crop.
yes.
There you go.
Yes.
That's where it was found. But it's not. It was. But anyway, and so he calls it a diamond, which is not a diamond. Clearly, it's
No.
that kind of gem.
No.
And Holmes knows what it is right away, or Watson does too. And it's the Countess of Morcar's Blue Carbuncle.
Hmm.
It's been in the newspaper that this valuable gem was stolen from the Hotel Cosmopolitan on December 22nd, right before Christmas. It is invaluable. Well, it is. The reward was £1,000, but that's nothing.
Like a 20th of the price.
And the commissionaire's like, what? Well, we'll get to the end about that.
£1,000. Yeah.
But he can't even imagine having £1,000.
I mean, that's a lot of money for for the typical working class at that
Oh,
point.
that's
like $1 million for most
yeah.
people.
And especially if you're older, you're set.
Mhm.
You're done. You don't have to work. So, well,
Exactly.
you could, of course, do what everybody does who hits the lottery and just spend it all and then wind up in tax trouble. But you wouldn't
Yeah.
have to if you were really careful.
Yes.
Anyway, a plumber was accused, John Horner, because he was in doing work on the room. And James Ryder, superintendent at the hotel, gives evidence against him.
Mhm.
That when it was taken, Ryder gave the alarm and Horner was arrested.
Mhm.
Captain Cusack, maid to the Countess,
Yes.
also deposed having heard Ryder's cry of dismay. And it is Inspector Bradstreet on the scene here, who we just saw in the episode last the adventure before this, Man with the Twisted Lip. So I know because we've gone out of order. Bradstreet was in Twisted Lip, and he's also in Blue Carbuncle, and
we get back to back Bradstreets.
And yeah, so he's in 2 in a row, and then he's in like 3 or 4, and then he's in another one as well. But but Ryder and Cusack are witnesses, and right away this is if you are learning in that day or now as an adept clue reader, you're given names and you're given people on the scene here, and this is Holmes registers this stuff right off the bat.
Yeah.
So Horner is sent to the assize. He's going to be tried at the assizes, which I think, I don't know if we covered it in one of these episodes, or because I did this on my Pickwick show too. I might have covered it there. I'm not sure. The when you're referred to the assizes, they're for felony crimes, basically what we would call them in America now. So they're much more serious, and they lead to prison time. You're not like in front of a local magistrate where maybe you do a little bit of jail time in a local jail and maybe pay something. This is a serious crime where you're going to go to prison.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
um and um and because Horner had actually had a previous conviction for robbery, so it's one of the
Mhm.
reasons referred to the assizes.
He strikes.
He faints and is carried out of the court.
Yep.
And Holmes is and Holmes says the question for us now to solve is the
Mhm.
sequence of events from a rifled jewel case at one end,
Mhm.
crop of a goose in Tottenham Court Road at the
Yes.
other. So
Such a great line.
it's finding Henry Baker. That's who we
Mhm.
need to find to, start this, investigation out, is to find Henry Baker.
Mhm.
And and then Holmes puts an ad out for him, found at the corner of Goode Street, a goose and a black felt hat. Mrs. Henry Baker can have the
Mhm.
same by applying 221B Baker Street. So he's put an ad out for him, sends it in all the newspapers, with the commissionaire.
Yeah, which back then probably, I mean, I imagine it wouldn't be as expensive as it would be today to put an ad in all the newspapers, but my gosh, that had to have been a little bit of expensive.
But there's a lot of newspapers.
But there's a lot of newspapers and there's a lot of expense. But then again, this is also an exceedingly expensive jewel with a very wonderful reward.
This is also something that Doyle's not being careful in figuring out how much money Holmes has and how much he makes from his clients. And
Exactly.
you can piece it together knowing that, the King of Bohemia gave him a bag full of gold at one point. And,
Mhm.
in some cases, then he tells people, it's just solving the case is my only reward. So it seems to me that what you could piece together yourself is that Holmes is supported by wealthy clients and then can
Mhm.
also do other cases because those wealthy people support
Yeah.
him.
So a little pro bono work.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So he has money to do this kind of investigation. Um, and then he tells Watson, he knows the story of this, or he's gathered it from the
Mhm.
newspapers because, it was just stolen. And the jewel itself, what does
Ooh.
he say? Do you have that there? It's
That's
a
it's a Bonnie thing. Just see how it glints and sparkles. You know, of course, it's the nucleus and focus of crime. Every good stone is. They are the devil's pet baits. In the larger and older jewels, every facet may stand for a bloody deed. And this stone is not yet 20 years old. It was found in the banks of the Amoy River in
Amoy
southern.
River.
Yes, Amoy River in southern China, and is remarkable for having every characteristic of the carbuncle, save that it is blue in shade instead of ruby red, thus ruby red today. Um, in spite of its youth, it already has a sinister history. There have been 2 murders, a vitriol throwing, a suicide, and several robberies brought about for the sake of this 40-grain weight of crystallized charcoal. Who would think that such a pretty toy would be a purveyor to the gallows and the prison? I'll lock it up in my strongbox now and drop a line to the Countess to say that we have it.
I love that this thing that everybody prizes and is so valuable and beautiful. These are the kinds of things
Yeah.
that lead to lots of criminal activity and, the devil's pet baits. That's
Yes.
really great. There's
Such greatness.
also a little hint here that I
Mhm.
love is where it was found,
Mhm.
which is the Amoy River in
Yeah.
China,
Yes.
which is Xiamen,
Mhm.
but Amoy was like from a different Chinese
Yep.
dialect pronunciation. And that means it was likely found by the British during the Opium War because
Mhm.
that river factors into the
Yeah.
British in the I don't know which Opium War, because I think there were 2 or
Several.
3
Yeah.
Opium Wars, um, in which the British had been growing opium in India, and of course it's selling in England and there's
Mhm.
opium dens, as we saw in The Man with the Twisted Lip. But the
Mhm.
biggest market for opium is China.
Ooh.
And China says, no more opium. We're not taking your opium anymore. And so the
Mhm.
British do what any businessman does. they get the military involved and they go to war with China to force them to buy opium or to continue the trade. Now there's bigger issues here. It's about the whole trade going on. It's about the kind of opium is a valuable commodity. It's like money, and the British can't afford to lose that within their, within trade. And but it's despicable is what it is. And they really and they defeat the Chinese easily because of the British military at the time, and the Chinese don't have the same kind of advances in their military yet. And they force these horrible treaties on them where the British pretty much get just free reign in running their trade in and out of China. And they get to and they love that. At one point, the Chinese to combat this, they burn all the opium. They capture the opium and they burn it all. And the British and then go to battle and they force them to take other opium. But it actually was a good thing for the British that they did that. And they may have even let them do that because burning all that opium meant the price of the opium then coming in was going to be even higher because of the scarcity of opium. So,
drug wars, basically. I mean, this parallels the American war on drugs.
I bring all this up because it is another little thing of this kind of this jewel itself probably comes from, well, it definitely comes from the region where the British were at war with the Chinese, and that river itself is mentioned in in some of the battles, or there's a battle that happens near there, and the British control that river, so that's hinting at where it's found. More than once, Doyle has come up with things that the British, there's a kind of curse on things that happen because of the endeavors of the British Empire. And that's a theme that goes through several stories, that Doyle is aware of this thing, that he's an imperialist. He's in favor of the British Empire.
Totally imperialist.
But there's this, he loves to tell the stories about the things that come out of it that curse the British.
Well,
as this jewel has done to several people.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think it's feasible for Doyle to have been an imperialist, but also recognize that the influence of those cultures onto the Brits, is part of what brings this curse, and it is the British that are civilizing these cultures, and taming these cultures, thus the support of imperialism. I actually kind of wrote an essay about that in a BSI Press book at some point. But anyway, please continue. This is fabulous.
That's it. That's where I want to take this to. And I'm going to take this moment, as I should have taken a little while ago, to do our mid-break, in which I thank you for watching or listening to Sherlock Mondays. The Rosenbach community reaches all around the globe, brought together by our love for history, rare books, manuscripts, and the arts. I love that we have people all over the world, from New Zealand to England to Philadelphia, where we're coming from the Rosenbach.
And Oconomowoc.
And Oconomowoc, thank you. So I did, yes, Oconomowoc. So did I say it right? Oconomowoc.
You did. I'm proud of you. I'm very proud.
I had actually looked that word up and thought I knew how to say it, and then in saying it, I completely messed it up the last time.
Oh no, it's okay. I'm from Wisconsin. I know how to pronounce these things.
It's actually the way it's spelled. That's why I thought it was easy. So it's not that hard. Anyway, I hope you will consider supporting the Rosenbach and Sherlock Mondays by donation, which you can do at our website or by becoming a member. Membership gives you free museum admission, discounts on programs and courses, and exclusive invitations to member-only events. You can learn more about how to become a member on our website. Part of membership is early access to programs and course registration, including right now when members only can register for the programs and courses which are on, which have just gone out for our winter right now, including the courses. There's a Dracula course coming up in the winter that I will be teaching. There is a weekly James Joyce Ulysses course that will come up. There's a couple Robert Burns offerings. There's a course on Virginia Woolf. There's lots of great in-person programs as well at the Rosenbach. If you live in the area, there's a great Burns Night celebration we do on January 25th every year. Lots of behind the bookcase offerings. Behind the bookcases are where we bring a small group of people, up to 12 maximum, and we bring you into the library at the Rosenbach, and we pull the books off the shelves and the manuscripts out of the drawers, and we put them in your hands. Put them in your hands and talk about them. And they're great little programs that we get to do. There's book clubs as well that we do at the Rosenbach. Members can register right now for these programs. The general public can register after January 3. So if you're not watching live and you're watching in January, catching up on all the stuff you didn't do in December, after January 3, the general public can. But if you're a member of the Rosenbach, you can register now. At this time of the year, I should also mention that the Rosenbach membership makes a great gift. I really can't stress how important your support is. So if you haven't made a donation or joined as a member, or have the ability to make a further donation, I would be very grateful for you for doing so. Well, excuse me. And that's all we'll do with the mid-break tonight. So I want to finish this story. Holmes tells Watson to return later because they're going to have a nice meal. Like, I love the food stuff, right? As Scott mentioned it earlier when he was on, excuse me, come back for, I dine at 7. There is a woodcock, I believe. And I looked up woodcock quickly online as I'm reading. I'm like, oh yeah, I want to try that bird. So
yeah, I did make my husband, I shouldn't say make, but I did request of my husband a couple of years ago to make me Christmas goose, and it was quite lovely. We can't find woodcocks around here, but
I've never had goose, I don't think.
The goose, I mean, it's bloody expensive here.
Yeah.
Like I think I think he dropped $130 on the goose because that's how unpopular it is and
Well,
expensive.
in Holmes's London, like people were just like had a flock of geese in their backyard in the city. Of course,
Yeah. Well, then again, we also have like urban chickens. So or people have urban chickens nowadays. So, I'm just gonna roll with that. But my poor husband in the background showing up about the goose. But yeah, he made the Christmas goose, and it was exquisite. I mean, it's really good. It's like duck, but like amplified and really amazing and fatty, and I loved it. So
yeah, I think I'll like it a lot, but I just have to have one. One of these Christmases, I have to force everybody to have a goose. So we'll just do it on a non.
No, you can just come to Iowa, and I'm sure Bill will make a Christmas goose for you all.
Oh, that's it. There you go. Well, Watson does come back, and he arrives at the same time as Henry Baker, who's wearing a Scotch bonnet.
Oh, yes. Oh,
which for people that don't know is a tam o' shanter. It's it looks almost like a beret, and it's got all on the top.
Yeah, it's fabulous. I know I have a friend who wears one of those, and it's quite lovely. It works on him. Yeah. I can see it not working on most people.
It's a good thing to wear for Burns night.
Exactly.
And they go up to the room, and this is Henry Baker, and the massive head and a broad, intelligent face sloping down to a pointed beard of grizzled brown, a touch of red in the cheeks, with a slight tremor of his extended hand. Now, the tremor is a sign that it could be.
I mean, it could be anxiety, but it's likely that it's alcohol withdrawal.
The red nose has got nothing to do with it. That's an old thing that people used to think that, you drink, you get the red nose, and that's actually, it's not related, really.
Drug and alcohol. There is a thing, with that. Oh, hi.
Yeah. Oh, that one is the broken capillaries in the nose that causes the red nose.
Thank you.
As you enjoy the bouquet of wine or alcohol, it will break the capillaries in your nose, and then those will slowly turn slightly purple, almost reddish.
So Bill's right. Yeah. Thank you, Bill.
Oh, it could happen. Yes. There we go.
It could happen. But, that's, we'll just say upon how I make my case for Henry Baker's alcoholism. But
there we go.
Yeah.
That's okay. So thank you for the clarification. So
Yes, guest appearance by my ginger.
it turns out all of Holmes's deductions are true, that everything about Henry Baker, is what he thought about him.
Mhm.
And the and then he questions him to find this out, and then Holmes tests him to see if he knew the thing. He's like, "Oh, we can give you the remains. We ate your bird, but we can give you the remains." And he's like, "What do I don't need that."
Yeah, I don't need the disjecta
Disjecta
membra.
membra,
Oh, yes.
which is to show how big a brain he has, right?
Yes,
Only people with big brains use those old Latin terms.
exactly.
And he finds out that he got the goose at the Alpha Inn Goose Club, and
Yeah.
that and then and Windigate by name instituted the Goose Club, and then okay, so he leaves, and all I can think, and then he's happy to have a goose. Oh, good, I have a goose. I can finally bring home to my wife and do this. But
Yeah, I can make things right with the wife.
this is the second day after Christmas, and all I can think of is the saddest Christmas ever for Henry Baker, when his wife is like,
Yeah.
I thought you were bringing home a goose. And he's like, oh, no, I got drunk and some people and I dropped it. And the saddest
Oh,
Christmas ever he must
it
be.
is.
Like, he's already on the outs. Like, they don't have a good relationship. And he thought,
Exactly.
like, I'd bring the goose home.
As a peace offering.
And these last 2 days have been the worst for Henry
Yes.
Baker.
Wah, wah, wah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Poor Henry Baker.
All righty. Well, now are you hungry, Watson? Not particularly. Well, then let's go. Well, the clue is still hot. I like that, that Sherlock is hot on the trail, a hot clue right here is going on. So, it is and now I love this little bit of stuff. It's a bitter night, so we wrap things up. The stars were shining coldly in a cloudless sky. The breath. Oh, look at this. Look at these drinks just coming, like one after the other.
I know. I best husband ever. Thank you, Bill.
It's very, it really sets this is a Christmas story, right? It's in the winter time, and that's when we get this. But then he has this, I love this, the breath of the passersby blew out into smoke like so many pistol shots. And that little simile there really kind of, Doyle reminds us it's a crime story. Like, there's really nobody gunning anybody down in this story, but it is a crime story, and that's the feel for it. It's Christmas, but breath looks like pistol shot. And that could be a Chandler line. That could be line.
Yeah, it's very noir-esque.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hard boiled is
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I like that touch there.
Yeah.
They head off to
the Alpha.
The Alpha. And we also find out that the doctor's quarter. So perhaps this is where Watson actually has his practice, Wimpole Street or Harley Street. So through, Wigmore Street into Oxford, to Bloomsbury at the Alpha Inn. You can find several, and I put one on our Facebook page. Here's somebody mapping out the Blue Carbuncle. It's it's fun to do online, and or it'd be fun to do in real life. I'll get a little bit to how much the walking is going on here. But the streets of the doctor's practice here, he mentions Wimpole Street. Doyle lived at 2 Upper Wimpole Street in 1891. That's where he set up his ophthalmic practice, the eye doctor practice that he was running at 2 Upper Wimpole Street. He was also, Doyle at the time, was doing research at the British Museum Library, and it's the Wimpole Street practice where nobody was coming in, so he had no patience, so he's writing more.
Exactly.
And then Sherlock Holmes stories.
Well, you got to do something to pass the time.
So it makes a little bit of a cameo here, and that Holmes is walking around that area where he had his offices. So he's and I think in this story, all the the geography works
Mhm.
especially well because Doyle is now
Well,
living
yeah,
there and
he's
knows.
in his neighborhood essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that does not hold true to every single Sherlock Holmes story. A lot of the times the geography doesn't work, but
Yeah,
this one, it does.
it does. And it's because he knows this area. Well, they go to the Alpha Inn. They have 2 glasses of beer, and
Yay.
or do they? Because they when they leave so quickly, I don't know. Did they
They
stay and
they probably they probably paid
finish?
for it, had a couple of sips, and then left.
Do they drink their beer? I know in the Jeremy Brett version of it, they leave and then the bartender turns around and they're gone. But I don't know. I would have drank the beer and then left. But
Well,
uh,
yeah, we would have done that, but they're hot on a case, so
hot on the trail.
exactly hot on the trail. The alcohol can wait.
As Holmes says, there is a man who will certainly get 7 years penal servitude unless we can establish his innocence. So
Ah,
it's
yes,
important that we can keep moving on here. And then they
exactly.
go across Holborn, Endell Street, and the zigzag to Covent Garden. And you can plug these things into your Google and you'll find out that it is about a 40-minute walk, almost 2 miles
Hmm.
from Baker Street to the Alpha Inn. That's the big distance right there, which is near the British Museum.
And it's bloody
Then,
cold outside.
and then it's about a 15-minute walk to Covent Garden. So it's an hour walk is what
Yep.
they're doing out in the freezing cold at night. And they still have to walk an hour back. So that's,
Unless they catch a cab on the way back.
yeah, it's not terrible, but that's it's not just down the street.
Yeah.
They go to Covent Garden for the you would actually not likely to find this is where Doyle gets it wrong. You wouldn't
Mhm.
actually find poultry at Covent Garden. I saw
Yes.
this in a couple different annotated things that poultry was sold at the Leadenhall Market or Smithfield Market. And
Yes.
this is an example of Doyle might know these streets because he's walked around them, but guess what he hasn't done? He hasn't had to go out and buy poultry.
Exactly. He hasn't, I mean, he has people for that.
Yes. Someone else has done that for him, so he doesn't know you can't actually get poultry at the Covent Garden Market, but that's where they go. And they see this man Breckenridge who sold the Alpha Inn guy said he bought the
Mhm.
geese from, and he's a horsey looking man.
Oh yes, horsey, but I mean, which if one is looking at the concept of gambling, it's such a great
That's what
description.
it is. Because it doesn't mean he's got like some
Yeah,
elongated big teeth
I
kind
mean,
of horse big face.
it's perfect.
It means he's devoted to horses or horse racing or
Yes,
gambling. That's
exactly.
what he means by horsey looking, not that he looks
Exactly.
like a
Yes,
horse.
exactly.
People
But I
make
mean, that's why there's the pink on, which that
But
he
that confirms it later.
yeah.
Yeah. And Holmes does the thing where, he asks about the geese and Breckenridge is all like, oh, stop asking about the geese. And he's angry.
Yeah.
It turns out more than one person. Well, someone else has asked about it. And Holmes decides that he will bet him about the geese and makes the bet.
Mhm.
He reveals to Watson later he got the info because he had the pinkin
Yep, the pink
in
one.
his pocket somewhere. He saw he had a pinkin with him, and the pinkin is the pink one was a sporting paper that was
Yes.
printed on pink paper. And
Essentially bets, or racing
yeah,
odds.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was actually a lot of football news in it. Soccer for you Americans.
The proper football versus, yeah.
But it was sporting people had it and people that would like to make bets would have it. So he was clearly a gambling man if he had a copy of this newspaper,
Mhm.
the pink in his paper. And that's how Holmes knows that
Yep.
he is and Holmes gets him to find out where the geese are from because of this. It's
Mhm.
Mrs. Oakshott at 117 Brixton Road.
Yep.
So he pays him and I love the little touch where
Yep.
Breckenridge says, hey, wait a minute. Well, I thought you bet that guy too, Watson.
Yeah,
Like you
you
have to
got
pay
paid.
him. And
Yep.
Holmes has to pay him as well. which is fun.
That's one of my favorite moments in the Jeremy Brett Granada episode is him calling him out. It's quite lovely.
So Holmes knows where to go now for where the geese turned up, and then while he and Watson are over there, he hears Breckenridge shouting with another man about the geese again. So this may save us a visit to Brixton Road, whispered Holmes, and they come and confront that person. And Ryder says, you can finish the Sherlock line. Who are you? How would you know anything of the matter?
My name is Sherlock Holmes. It is my business to know what other people don't know. Oh, such a great line.
It is my business to know what other people don't know. That should be on like a
business card or something,
right? Yeah, like consulting detective, and it says, knowing what other people don't know would be his, tagline.
Oh yes, it's perfect.
Ryder tries to give him a false name. My name is John Robinson, and Holmes is like, no,
no. Yeah, it's what is it? It's an awkward business it's awkward doing business with an alias.
Yeah, so he has to give him his real name. Oh, it's okay, it's James Ryder, and then Holmes knows who he is. Head of 10 at the Hotel Cosmopolitan, and Ryder's starting to get scared. But they take him in a carriage back to Baker Street to get the real story.
I'm not sure if I'd go into like a cab with some strange people that I just met online.
Well, Ryder needs it. Ryder needs to find the goose. Like somebody knows where the goose is, what became of the goose.
Yeah.
He has to go. Like he has no choice in the matter.
Yeah.
It's
a little sketchy.
But this is a great instance of Doyle not overstepping the bounds of credulity. Like, of course, Ryder would go with him. He has to find out, and the kind of person that he is, he has to go with him. They get back to Baker Street, and he tells Ryder to take a seat in the basket chair. Holmes says, "I will just put on my slippers." Oh man,
I'm gonna get comfortable so we can talk.
I love that little detail, and it is really Holmes completely I'm in control here. This is a way of letting you know I'm in complete control.
Exactly.
And he tells him that the goose, it laid an egg after it was dead, the bonniest, brightest little blue egg that was ever seen. I have it here in my museum. And then he holds it up.
Yeah.
Of course, you should watch the Jeremy Brett one
so wonderful.
TV, where he does a little magic trick kind of thing, and then he comes out with the jewel to show him. And Holmes immediately attacks him. The game's up, Ryder. And hold up, man, or you'll be into the fire. Give him an arm and help him to the chair, Watson.
Yes.
He's not got blood enough to go in for felony with impunity. Give him a dash of
the brandy.
So what a shrimp it is, to be sure. He calls him a shrimp. I wonder why shrimp was chosen as a kind of diminutive for people. And it goes way back. Like it goes back to classical times, because I looked it up. Plenty of things are smaller than a shrimp. I wonder why shrimp became the thing, like, of saying something's really small or someone's really small, that they're a shrimp. I don't know.
Maybe there's paper in that, Ed.
It did become, the thing, and it means not just that he's a small person. In this case, it means he is small of character. He is just he has no strength, no ability in him to combat anybody. Of course, the brandy brought a tinge of color to his cheeks, because brandy always helps in these stories. As it doesn't.
Brandy, more brandy.
Holmes wants him. He says, I have almost every link in my hands and all the proofs which I could possibly need. So there is little which you need to tell me. Still, that little may as well be cleared up to make the case complete.
Yep. Oh, yes. Basically, fill us in.
He's an OCD detective, isn't he? He has to know every little detail, or he can't. I brought this up in the smoking plugs and dottles of the thing. It's like Holmes can't leave anything unfinished. he has to, even if it's like the end of the tobacco in a pipe, he has to then bring it out and then smoke it in another pipe because for me, it reads as this isn't complete, so I need to finish it. And every single case that he does, he has to know every deal. Sign of 4. Oh, so that's where the rope came from. You brought the rope. I didn't know that. Like he has to know all of the details.
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess what it comes down to though is that like if I was Holmes, I would want to know. I mean, you know, if if an element of the puzzle was not complete, you want that final piece. And so I can appreciate the fact that it's not satisfying unless there's every piece fits together lockstep. So, yeah.
Well, Ryder tells the story of how he got it, and he blames the maid right off the bat, right?
Yeah, it's all Catherine's fault.
Yes. The temptation
the
of
chick.
sudden wealth, you know, well, Holmes says the temptation of sudden wealth was too much for you, but he says, you know, right away, he's like, oh, it was Catherine Cusack, that that who told me of it. And he tells him the story of how it happened, but he won't go wrong again. And there's a great Paget illustration of this, which is right here. Here's him. He's holding up the
yes.
thing. He's pleading like, please.
Yes, he's
mercy.
Nibbling.
He shrieked. So Watson's got his and I almost like the first time I look at it, like, does he have a gun? Oh no, he's holding
it's a
glass of brandy as well.
Brandy. Wait, no.
But the way he's holding it, you know, he's got to point out. Don't worry, man. I have brandy for you. So yeah, there's Holmes triumphant. Holmes, you know, in control over the in this case, the sniveling, you know, criminal. In other stories, the criminals look much different in the picture, and we'll see in the one that comes up in the barrel coronet. It's a much different picture.
Yes.
Holmes confronting the criminal at the end, but in this one, it's he's at his mercy, and that's what he's asking for, is mercy.
Yes, have mercy.
Which will control how Holmes, you know, resolves this in the end. He asked him to tell the whole story, and of course, you know, to do that, Holmes needs to smoke a pipe. Oh no, I'm sorry.
Wait,
he tells the story.
Ed should smoke a pipe.
Yeah. What's funny is that Ryder, in his story, at one point, he says, after he gets to his sister's house where the geese are held, yes, I went into the backyard and smoked the pipe and wondered what it would be best to do. You know, Holmes smokes a pipe and figures out a case, and Ryder has to smoke a pipe to figure out how he's going to get away with this jewel that he has.
Yeah.
And again, he gives it to one of the geese in his sister's yard, and it swallows it, and then he takes the wrong bird.
Yeah, it's a case of the wrong fowl.
It's a foolish kind of thing that the criminal does here, but it works so well for this story that it's not this criminal mastermind job that
he's just a hapless dude who tried to take advantage of the fact that you know, there was an opportunity that presented itself. It's a crime of opportunity.
And he breaks down again. Now I am a branded thief without ever having touched the wealth for which I have sold my character. God help me. God help me. He burst into convulsive sobbing with his face buried in his hands. And go ahead. Do you have that there? There was a long
yes. Silence. There was a long silence broken by his heavy breathing and by measuring the tapping of Sherlock Holmes's fingertips upon the edge of the table. Then my friend rose and threw open the door. "Get out," said he. "What, sir? Oh, heaven bless you." "No more words. Get out."
Get out. Like, his reaction is to, like, he just kicks him out. And this is, you know, like, I'm not, you know, like, you're just gone. And then his final speech to Watson is,
I love this line as delivered by Jeremy Brett because it's so delightfully angry. But I'm not retained by the police to supply their deficiencies. line.
Yeah.
It's basically like, it's not my job to do the job of the police. I'm not here to to basically bring someone to justice via the law. I'm here to bring someone to justice as it is from maybe a sociological perspective.
He says it reaching up his hand for his clay pipe, I might add. But
Yes.
he says if Horner were in danger, Horner, who had been accused of it and is in jail right now, would be another thing. But this fellow will not appear against him, and the case must collapse. So it's, I mean, who am I to say, Holmes, you're wrong? That seems like
we're leaving a lot to chance.
I'd be a little more worried about Horner in jail at that point, that you really need to like get him off. But okay, so that's what's going to happen here.
Yeah,
but
and Holmes acknowledges he's committing a felony, or possibly committing a felony in the process. But he recognizes that that justice would not be served here if you make Ryder a jailbird. You make him a jailbird for life.
I suppose.
Never mind about Horner, though.
But... Yeah, he says, I suppose that I am commuting a felony, but it is just possible that I am saving a soul. This fellow, Ryder, will not go wrong again. He is too terribly frightened. Send him to jail now, and you make him a jailbird for life. Besides, it is the season of forgiveness. Chance has put in our way a most singular and whimsical problem, and its solution is its own reward. I don't know. There's 1,000 pounds here. Wait. If you will have the goodness to touch the bell, Doctor, will we begin another investigation in which also a bird will be the chief feature? Let's eat. But before we get there, there is a reward, right?
Yeah, there's a reward, but I guess the question is the reward for Peterson? Is the reward
who's getting the reward?
Like, who
Holmes has got the jewel, right?
Yeah, but Peterson is the guy who found it. And so, one could make the argument perhaps that Peterson would get the 1,000 pounds. Holmes would probably negotiate for something larger.
Does he also give some of it to Baker?
I think Baker is unaware, and so why would Baker figure into this?
Well, but Holmes has all the power right now.
Yeah,
to distribute the reward to whoever he thinks.
Does he know how to find Baker again? Because he never got Baker's address. Baker came to him. So how would he find this Mr. Henry Baker again?
Well, if someone's going to find him, it's going to be Sherlock Holmes. So
I'm not sure that Holmes would be willing to distribute the extra.
Who would you give the reward? Would you give the reward to anyone?
I mean, I personally would give some to Peterson. I would definitely keep a little for myself. I'd throw a little extra to Henry Baker just because it's his mishap that started it. But I'm also a person who tries to think about what is fair and what is just. That to me feels fair and just.
Well, if that's the case, how about Horner? Horner should get
Horner should get some reparations, yes. Yeah. So a little bit for Horner, but he gets out of jail. But that's one of the things I appreciate about the Granada version is that
this show at the end.
This version, or the original version, the text version by Arthur Conan Doyle, leaves Horner in jail and the capes will just collapse. In the Granada episode with Jeremy Brett, they actually go to the jail and give testimony and get him out. And there's this really beautiful Christmas reunion, and it kind of makes me teary.
Yeah. Horner comes out and meets his wife and child, and in the snow,
and in
Christmas
the snow
music
and the
playing.
Music. Exactly. It's like cue every signal to make our heartstrings just tug at them. And
there's also the question that what if Holmes doesn't at all give the stone back? Because remember what he said about the Blue Carbuncle, that it's a thing of evil, and Holmes has the ability now to erase this thing of evil from the world. And so I think there is actually a possibility that you could argue that Holmes decides, I'm never going to get, this is going to remain in my,
museum,
my little museum of crime here, because to give it back to the Countess is going to again lead to someone else having it who's going to murder for it or
Well,
steal it or do something horrible for it.
Yeah, in the Granada episode, it's a little more ambiguous. He doesn't actually say, that he's going to like call upon the Countess of Morcar.
He puts it in the
No, it
drawer
just
and closes the drawer.
exactly it goes along with Irene Adler's portrait. So it's it is ambiguous, at least within the Granada episode, and with Holmes having been retained by the King of Bohemia and being at this point semi, I don't want to say independently wealthy, but at least being a man of means, he probably could pay off Peterson and pawn off the jewel later if he wanted to, but that's not what I got from the text. But from the Granada episode, there is that ambiguity.
Because he's let Ryder go.
Yeah.
But there was another criminal involved here, the maid who
Catherine Cusack
doesn't say anything about. Is he going to dime her out to the Countess? I mean, the only way he could get the maid is to like return the stone.
Yes.
Say that the maid was in on this.
Yeah, I mean, there is something to be said in terms of the intersection of like, for lack of a better term, sexism in the criminal justice system. We even see this today in the American criminal justice system, where women are often given chance after chance after chance after chance. But by the time that they actually get incarcerated, by the time that they go to prison, they're actually punished more heavily than their male counterparts because they are given chance after chance after chance after chance. And so if they oftentimes, if judges have reached the point of last resort to sentence somebody to prison, they are sentencing them harshly. It's very well documented. It's along with racial disparities. So it's fascinating. But I can see within the Victorian era, that there is this whole idea of the women being the fairer sex, being the less intelligent sex, that maybe Ryder manipulated her, even though she was the one who brought him the idea, that there's no way that, that they could bring a female criminal or schemer to justice in that traditional way. So, I mean, I can see kind of Victorian, gender dynamics in play here.
I'm very happy with the loose ends at the end of this story to leave you kind of wonder like how these loose ends are getting wrapped up, tied, whatever. And it's the maid and wondering whether Ryder really will be okay now as he goes away. And I don't know, I kind of feel like now he's losing his whole support system, like his sister, and what's he going to do elsewhere except eventually turn to crime? He already knows criminals. But who gets the reward and what happens to the stone? And I don't like all this at the end. But the bigger thing that Doyle's really trying to emphasize here is
season of forgiveness.
It's the season of forgiveness. And that's what really ties this in as a story for, the Christmas season.
Oh, yes.
And that this is and then this is the big thing from the guy back here from Dickens, is that it's the season where we all, come together a little closer. It's unfortunate it's only this time of the year for some people, but we're reminded of it, at least in these, Christian
within this context. Yeah. I mean,
the context of where they are. And Holmes and Doyle's written a story where Holmes and Watson are a part of that. So.
Oh yeah, and that's something that I genuinely love, is this idea of justice tempered with mercy. There is justice in terms of the case for Horner falling apart. There's justice in that Ryder, gets second lease on life. The Countess may not sure, get the jewel back. I mean, everything kind of, Henry Baker gets a replacement bird. I mean, basically everybody wins in this, in this story conclusion. And, how could we not love this conclusion?
Everybody lives!
Everybody lives!
Just
Everybody wins!
Doctor Who
thank you for the Doctor
No.
Who reference there. That's quite lovely.
Well, this story all happens in one day. This is like, early to late at night.
Yeah.
This is for me a perfect Doyle story.
Yeah.
Really, everything fits so well together, from the little thing with the hat in the beginning to discovering what this is really about, and then, oh, it was a crime, and then this investigation to find out, like literally off on the scent on the trail through the streets, and
Yeah.
find out and catch the criminal. And then the jewel of this story is, and then I just let him go, because
Very
it's the
sweet.
season of forgiveness. It's, this is a perfect Doyle. This is a perfect Sherlock story.
Oh, it's absolutely the perfect Sherlock story, which is why I argued that it was the best.
All righty.
Yeah.
Well,
I
let's leave perfection at the end of our discussion. Sherlockians, thank you for joining us for episode 14 of Sherlock Mondays. Monica, I am so happy to have you for this show. This was a great one to have you on. Thank you so much.
I'm glad that I got to come play, and I look forward to seeing you in a few weeks in New York.
And then you will return for episode 17.
Yes.
Silver Blaze.
Oh, nay. And we can talk about Watson and gambling.
There you go. We'll be for those watching now, we'll be off for the next 2 Mondays, so I can enjoy the Yule season with my family and drink lots of wassail and Dickens punch and sit around in my Father Christmas robe. Our next live show will be on January 8th for episode 15, when we will encounter more precious gems, the adventure of the Beryl Coronet, and Anastasia Klimchinskaya will be our co-host for that.
Yeah, Anna.
Thanks so much to Scott Monty and Burt Wolder for taking the time today to talk about I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere. I encourage all of you to listen, as I do, to their podcast, I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, and their companion podcast, Trifles, which I love as well. Their I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere podcast, they interview people, and then they do a little news segment, and they have a little contest at the end. And then Trifles is just Burt and Scott talking about some odd little thing in the story.
For like 15 to 20 minutes.
They talked about pencils
lovely.
A couple, episodes ago, and it's always a fun show to do, or to listen to.
Yes.
Thanks to our chat, Mrs. Hudson Brianna, for managing the live chat links. Thank you to the sponsor of Sherlock Mondays, Lisa Washington. We couldn't do these shows without the generous support of our patrons. You can support the Rosenbach through donation. Your support helps us create more programs like this and also care for our collections. You could also become a member. Membership gives you early access and discounts to programs and courses. You can find out more at our website, rosenbach.org. Again, let me remind you to subscribe to our channel, to like these videos. If you're listening to the podcast, leave us a review. Monica, compliments of the season to you.
And wishing you the compliments of the season as well. Much love, and we'll see you in the new year.
Thank you. Love, love. I am Edward G. Pettit of the Rosenbach Museum and Library, where the game is a book. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.